Hello and welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a new and special guest with us, Don Lay. Don is CEO of Medallion Resources, which can be traded as MDL on the TSX Venture and which can be traded as MLLOF on the OTC. Medallion is looking to produce magnet metals here in the USA. Thank you, Don, for being here with us today, especially with all the news that's going on surrounding rare earths and security of supply issues.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
Don, we're seeing all over the news concerns of this virus, this coronavirus in China, shutting down the economy. We know that a lot of these magnet metals that are used in electric vehicles, and many other applications, but most notably electric vehicles, which we see growing in demand at rapid rates. There's concerns of the security of supply issues. We're also seeing in the U.S. Some issues with the Department of Justice charging the Chinese with breaching the Equifax security breach, and so there's really issues, geopolitical issues with China that I haven't seen in my investing career. And I was wondering, Don, we've been in touch for over 10 years, both following this rare earth sector. I think that's when we first met at least a decade ago, and you've been following this sector. You've been following what's going on with China better than anyone, or one of the top voices in this space. So could you give us an update on what's going on in China with the rare earths, what's going on here in the U.S. To restart this production of these magnet metals?
Sure. Well, in China, it's pretty well known that China controls the bulk of the world's rare earths supplies, production, and processing. Certainly over 80%, maybe upwards of 85%. There's only one really big international producer outside of China. That's Lynas, an Australian listed company. But what's happening is I guess a couple things. One, first on the commercial side of it, and the coronavirus has kind of brought it to a head. Many of the car companies, automobile companies that are transitioning to hybrid and electric vehicles, and new ones like Tesla, in their Model 3, all use rare earths, two particular rare earths, neodymium and praseodymium, or NdPr, to really drive the traction motors that power the vehicle. So that's going to lead to very large projected increases in the use of those two metals, NdPr, and in transportation and automobile sector. And of course, the coronavirus is sort of bringing to light all the different chains of the part of the value chain, and how those things are supply chain for automobile manufacturers. Automobiles, just to manufacture one, to put one together, requires parts from dozens and dozens of different suppliers, and people have become dependent upon China for rare earths and these magnet metals. And so what I'm hearing now is, not surprisingly, that the different automobile makers that are moving to electric and hybrid vehicles are quite concerned about access to the rare earths, so they can do their production, given the changes in China. So that's one key thing, and that's really going to be the big commercial driver for the rare earth space, at least over the next 10 years, is the magnet metals, or NdPr principally, and that's where the market's quite interested in getting those. And we're well positioned with a feedstock that's rich in those magnet metals to produce. So, and we're in the processing game. We're not in the mining game. So it doesn't take us as long or as expensive to get to market. The other thing, which is quite interesting, you mentioned the U.S. domestic side of it, is that the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, is putting out specific tenders for helping to build the supply chain domestically in North America, to provide rare earths for the military as well. They don't want to be held hostage to China for these particular rare earths that are used in weapon systems and aircraft and submarines and all sorts of things. So there's money available for people to get into the rare earth processing business, and we put out some news related to that very thing today.
And before we discuss the news that you put out today on the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense. I'd like to remind listeners that it's not just the electric vehicle demand, but there's so many clean energy applications that require these magnets and so many new technologies with electric generation that is so crucial here. So, Don, let's highlight the recent news and before we highlight the Department of Defense. You've come up with a strategy to be a near-term producer for these rare earths. So before we discuss today's news with the U.S. Department of Defense, could you discuss the theory behind the company and the strategy that's going to kind of propel Medallion forward in this rare earth race?
Yeah, so we've taken a different approach. Most of the companies in the rare earth area that are out there developing properties. So they found a property that's got a deposit of rare earths, and they've drilled out that deposit, and then they've developed some metallurgy, and would like to build a mine and the processing plant to get to production. Most of those projects, and there's some in Canada, Africa, United States, Australia, are typically going to be $300 or $400 million upwards to $1.5 billion. So it's a long, expensive, time-consuming process, and to get these projects to marketplace. And rare earths are a niche market. They're $4 or $5 billion a year. They're not like copper or gold or something large that's more bankable. Our approach is very different. It's to take a high-grade byproduct mineral that somebody else is producing, have them upgrade that mineral for us, and it's sand. It's called monazite sand. Monazite being the mineral, and then we've developed a process for extracting the rare earth concentrates from that monazite in a safe, effective, cost-effective way, and do that in North America. So that's our business model is more of a processing model than it is a mining processing model. So it's significantly less capital, and it can be also scaled up in a modular fashion. So the byproduct mineral also is widely available around the world. So it's a bit of a different process or business model to get to market, but we think it really fits where the world's at right now, and we can help become a key supplier outside of China.
And Medallion made some big steps in that area recently. In the end of 2019, they completed a proprietary rare earth flow sheet and developed a chemical process model at the end of 2019. And then this year, 2020, you started looking for a U.S. site to start the rare earth processing facility. And you've also recently announced that you've received a U.S. Department of Defense inquiry. So talk to us about the U.S. site selection and some of the interest for the rare earth processing facility in the USA.
Yeah, so on the site selection, so we, to take a step back, we last year we finished the development of our process. We worked extensively with the Saskatchewan Research Council. It was directed by my metallurgist, Kurt Forrester, PhD out of the UK, and he's a super talented guy in process development work. And he worked with the Research Council to build the flow sheet, and we've tested that thoroughly and done the process modeling work for that. And really all of the R&D work is essentially complete now. We're out looking for sites that are suitable for processing the material in the United States, places that are going to work. So that's going to obviously be places that are open and cost effective for mineral processing, and that's what we're looking at to kind of get a heat map for the best potential locations for such a plant. So that's exciting times, and we'll be reporting on that in due course as well, on where we're at with that particular work. The Department of Defense topic that you brought up is really there's something that was enacted in 1950 called the Defense Production Act, and what it does is it allows the president, who's of course the commander in chief, to come up with presidential determinations about critical materials or supplies that are required for the military or key industrial sectors. But it's basically a War Measures Act that would allow for Congress to fund projects to deliver that key part of the value chain, if you will. And so the presidential determinations were issued in July of 2019, and that has allowed Congress through the Department of Defense to fund these new projects. And so there's a number of proposals that have been issued by the Department of Defense, and one of them, which I refer to in the news release today, is light rare earth processing and separation. And so the key thing being, of course, the magnet metals, neodymium and praseodymium, NdPr, is a key part of what the government's seeking in that. So they're encouraging basically the value chain in that, and there's $40 million set aside for that processing. We've gotten a significant amount of interest from refiners and potential refiners that can process our material for that. And so I was referring today was the inquiries we've had for that. There's a lot of work going on under the covers, if you will, or behind the scenes in the rare earth business, and that's in effect what today's news release was talking about. So there's that sort of military demand for the material for national security, and then there's also key demand drivers in the industrial world, but principally from the automotive side and the EV and hybrid markets we talked about.
Don, we've been speaking for many years about this rare earth crisis in the USA, North America. With the news that we were recently seeing in China and with the interest that we're seeing in the US, how would you rate, or how do you see the current time that we're in for investors that might be new to rare earths or might have held on for many years? How do you see the time that we're in right now? And what specifically in Medallion's history do you find so exciting and compelling at this moment?
Well, the time is very interesting right now. Rare earths had a big boom period, sort of late 2009 through 2012. Enjoyed a lot of investor interest during that period of time. A lot of money was raised. Molycorp went bankrupt. Lynas, the Australian producer, succeeded, and since then a number of other juniors have switched businesses and gone off to do other things. We had a different business model, as I mentioned before, that wasn't as capital intensive and it didn't demand. We have a hard rock project, so it's a different business model, and we've managed to continue to invest in the process development work and business development work to be in a position to take advantage of what looks like to be a change in market tone. I think that happened actually the second quarter of last year when President Xi of China went to a rare earth magnet factory and obviously rattled the trade tensions. Now we're seeing, of course, coronavirus. We're also seeing, I would say, it's being acknowledged that the principal geopolitical adversary of America is probably China, and especially as it relates to intellectual property and trade secrets and things like that. And so there's a lot of focus on the attention on that area, and rightly so. And now we're seeing, of course, market interest from the electric and hybrid vehicle marketplace. So the whole security supply thing applies to both the military and to the automakers as well. They've got long lead times for producing products, so they can't decide to change a car that's being assembled and put in a different type of motor without these magnets. They need the magnets to do that, and they pretty well got duplicate supply lines for everything except for that kind of thing. So it's certainly bringing a lot more attention to it. So we're in interesting times right now, Jeb. And it looks like the market has turned.
Don Lay, CEO of Medallion Resources. You can get more information on Medallion by going to their website, medallionresources.com. They're on Twitter. You can email them at info@medallionresources.com. You can also call them at 604-681-9558. Don's always been available to me to answer questions about the rare earth sector and about Medallion. Thank you, Don, for being here with us today and for giving us some insights into the rare earth space and into specifically Medallion, which can be traded as MDL on the TSX Venture and as MLLOF on the OTC. Thanks, Don, for being here with us today.
Hey, thanks, Jeb. Appreciate it.